this just fantasy, or is this Red Nails 3? Too many red nails. Well, actually, it's just red nails. So, this is our final video of this series where I am going to compare and contrast our two adaptations of Conan's Red Nails. So I don't want to get into this one's better than that one. I feel like that is a presumptuous and really not a very helpful way to examine these two works, because they are both adaptations. They are sub-works of the source material by Robert E. Howard, which was originally illustrated by the likes of Harold S. DeLay, who did the interior illustrations, and they're really nice, just ink illustrations. You get the dinosaur, we get Prince Olmec, and we get the Tolkemec knife throw scene that we also got in this one. And we also had the first illustration on the cover of Weird Tales by Margaret Brundage, or more like Margaret Bondage. And that's the depiction of the climactic scene, and very akin to Margaret Brundage, we get kind of the naked sacrifice, if you will. Anyway, Red Nails is a perennial as far as considered one of the best, if not the best, Conan the Barbarian story, which I find fascinating because there are many great stories. In fact, I feel like there may be a sequel set of videos in the future where I want to compare and contrast Barry Windsor Smith's The Frost Giant's Daughter with the Ablaze version of The Frost Giant's Daughter, and compare and contrast those two. So, the works of Robert E. Howard are alive and well, even if people are just kind of adding to and riffing on that world, like in the case of classic Marvel Comics, as well as Dark Horse Comics and present-day Titan Comics. But as far as adaptations, like, Red Nails is the go-to. One of the things I will point out is that there's like a tabletop game adaptation of it, and like I said last time, there was a film version, or rather a animated version that was begun, again, like kind of in the spirit of the old heavy metal movie, with the voice actor, like including Ron Perlman as Conan. I mean, he's got a great voice, and that sounds pretty cool, but that never got made. So we're just left with these adaptations at present for the main versions of Red Nails. So, how am I going to compare them? What am I going to compare about them? Well, let's start with the simple matter of which of these is the most accurate representation or adaptation of the source material. And I mean, the choice is obvious. It is definitely the Roy Thomas Barry Smith book. And just the simple fact that Barry Smith and Roy Thomas kept as much of the original story in as they could, including just how the story plays out. Because we start with her watering her horse, she climbs the hill. So much of this language is just lifted directly from Robert E. Howard. And even this choice of keeping the dinosaur, a Stegosaurus, is also just in keeping with the source material. There are a few different changes throughout. Like, for instance, the we don't see how the Xotalankas get into their hideout like we do in this version of Red Nails, where we get to see, wow, right to the page, where we get to see the magic piping, as well as, like I pointed out before, that great conversation between these two warriors about what they're going to do when the war is over. That's not present here. It's this one stays pretty focused on Conan and Valeria, but another note, and then also we keep as much torture in here as we possibly can, um, uh, and like I pointed out, even though I don't want to harp on it, this one does keep at least a little more of Robert E. Howard's rather unfortunate obsession with like racial matters, or rather like the racial makeup of a group and its implications on their capabilities when it comes to building homes and whatnot. I don't know, like, and yeah, there's, I don't want to get into it because it's just unpleasant, and both adaptations are better for not focusing on it or harping on it repeatedly like Robert E. Howard does. This one at least this one has a little bit of it. This one has like none of it whatsoever, owing to the times that they're both made. But we are, yeah, and then I just think, yeah, that this is just very, very loyal to the source material, even to the point of including that useless crawler. I know that it's like this cool thing, but it's not used to its full extent. I would have loved to have seen this thing in action, as it were. Um, so yeah, I would say by far the closer adaptation to the source material comes in the form of the Barry Smith, Roy Thomas version. But of course, it's Roy Thomas. He's not, if he can help it, he's not going to leave a single word out of the source material, or as little as possible. Again, he has the award, as far as I'm concerned, for the most accurate adaptation of Dracula ever. But that's not just it, because another way to compare these things is the quality of the art, but that's another place where I really don't feel right saying one is superior to the other, because I mean, it's been said many times, and I would agree that this is a masterpiece. I would say a masterpiece of this era of Conan the Barbarian, and I would say it's also just one of the best things that Barry Smith drew. And so that's a long shadow to be paired next to. And I just feel like it is not fair when this has been around for so long and looms so large in so many people's minds, that to disparage it or to cast it as less than or even equal to something else is heresy, you might say. And just to compare these two, like, they're just staged so differently. Like here, they're running from the dinosaur. He's carrying her for some reason, even though that would just majorly slow him down. But I guess she can't run nearly as fast. I don't know. But then he just very quickly throws her, and she just lands on her neck, breaking her neck and paralyzing her for life, so that he can swing his sword and cut this thing before it smashes into a tree and dies. So just as a comparison of this scene, there's I can't even remember if in the source material he does this. He picks her up and then throws her. My guess is that he does, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. Whereas here, because they're not Roy Thomas, they're willing to change things, and they just both run. He turns around and decides he's going to end this thing by slicing at it. And here, I would argue this is a more effective killing it, because he has blinded it, but it is just still like not dead yet, and it's still potentially dangerous to them. And so he turns, he charges, and he slices this thing's belly open, and then it collapses and it's dead. And I just feel like this, the way it's staged, it suits its purpose of killing this thing a little bit more clearly than this, because here it doesn't. I don't know, I guess because it can't see. He slices at it, but then he just darts out of the way, and then it crashes into a tree, and I'm not sure if it wouldn't have crashed into a tree before. I don't know. But that said, it's just a different way to do it. And also, I do remember it being that like it dies in the plains, I guess, or this dies in the plains at the very least. Anyway, that's just a comparison. Also, the dinosaur thing. That this is the fault, I will call it that, the fault of Robert E. Howard, and the fact that it's a Stegosaurus, which is a non-carnivorous dinosaur. It's a very cool looking dinosaur. It's one of the coolest looking ones. I love it, but it is non-carnivorous, and it's also not this. They weren't this big, I don't believe. Yeah, this is like a gigantic Stegosaurus, whereas this thing, which is a cobbled together creature, it's a variety of dinosaurs and things, that is its own thing, and but clearly is the form of a carnivorous dinosaur, and like it can be as big as it wants to be. And I'm not looking for scientific accuracy in Conan the Barbarian. I'm just not. But that said, it is something where, because of the era that I grew up in, knowing more about this dinosaur than Robert E. Howard ever did, it's just a little odd. It just strikes me visually as odd, seeing all these sharp teeth in its mouth and it being so big and it being carnivorous. Like, it just doesn't. My brain wants to change it in my head. It wants to be like, no, that's not right. That's not how those dinosaurs were, and yet that's how it's depicted. So, as far as how my brain treats it, this feels just a little bit more plausible, believable, and I don't know. There's also a little bit the other thing to compare art wise is, this is definitely the form of a comic from this era, which is many panels per page, less splashes. We occasionally get a good. I mean, splash usually means a full page, but uh, occasionally these larger panels for these kind of big ticket images, which that's a great image to make big. And we also get a bit of that, or like we do, see, it's all dependent on how it's staged. We get the reveal of the dinosaur in a bigger panel right here. But that's also funny though, is I want to show just the difference in how these two are revealed. So here they hear the sound of the horses, and then they sneak down, and the dinosaur bursts through. And so this is the first panel we get, and again, it's a little panel. That's the thing with most of these, is that they're many and they're small. And there's also lots of these caption balloons, and again, or caption squares, caption boxes. Why am I struggling with that word? And because of that, it slows down the reading process. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It makes you take your time on each panel. Now, as a creator myself, I take that time whether there's text on the panel or not, because I want to look at every single aspect of this, because I'm an artist and and I just want to see all the information this artist wants to give me. You know, seeing the blood trail out, seeing Conan's sword kind of guiding his view, communicating from this panel to that panel, where he's looking through this vegetation, where he's seeing this thing, and how the horse that he was riding is in this thing's mouth, and it's gigantic, communicating the size. Here we get the trigger of the creature looking at them. We get a bigger view with this crazy, like, they're not even like feathers, they're like prongs, like horns. And that's a way for them to get away with like the spikes on the back of a stegosaurus. They're like, oh, it has spikes on its back, but what we put on the back of its head and a little bit on its hindquarters. It's still a spiked dinosaur. It's just a carnivorous one. But yeah, I think this really, it's just the difference of a comic from the 70s versus a comic from 2019. Is there's been a lot more crossover with what I would like to call cinematic storytelling since the creation of this book. So what I'm saying is like this is cinematic. Like breaking out like moments like this is cinematic, and it's not that it's not present here. It's just cinema has had such a important influence on how these stories are told, where like, because like this is a big moment here, is seeing the city, because this is a hint towards where the bulk of this story is going to be told, is this city, and like this is where they're headed. And the fact that it's this kind of big sweeping image, like I can see this like on the big screen as like this big climactic moment. And this is how comic artists take the language of cinema, like big important shots and things like that, and apply it to a comic, because it's like you don't do every single panel that big, but you do the reveals, the pivotal moments, the all of these things. That's what gets this kind of cinematic treatment. And so I just think that's what's at play here. And also, even though like yeah, there's a decent number of panels here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 7 panels, but I would say that's the max most of the time. There's usually about 7 panels, usually a little less. And so here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's just the way things are now. And then also more wordless panels. Because like here, like them running to the city, that like Roy Thomas can scarcely leave any empty panels in this version of it. So there's just going to be these little caption boxes everywhere. That's why when I was going through this originally, the time when Conan finds his friend dead, right here, the fact that he dies, you know, his friend dies and he tells him where he needs to go. Yeah, we have this silent reaction and then this rage, and then he leaves the body and makes his way, getting his sword ready. And the fact that we don't have any captions there is like, I think is really cinematic in a way, or it's very it's better than cinematic because it's a comic, and it's showing the raw intent. There's no need to add any kind of extra context or caption. Like his action is all that is necessary to understand the intent and the feeling behind these panels. And I just love that we're just left to, we don't have any captions that flower it up or muddle it up, but we just move on, and then we get back into it up here with more captions and dialogue and such. But there's just, yeah, but here, because it's a modern comic, there's a lot less captioning. so much less captioning, which, like, there's room for, to throw a box there, but no, it's I guess the other approach, or the other thing that is taken from cinema, and that's as outside of a detective movie, or like, I don't know, the Wonder Years. You don't usually get like an image with a voiceover, because that's kind of what the purpose that, or the place that the caption boxes have in both this and this version, is it's a voiceover in a sense that gives greater context, or even in the case of this version, like, describes what's happening to a greater detail than just showing it, whereas this, for the most part, just shows things. And I think that's fine. That's something that I imagine the modern reader really appreciates, because it is less common these days to have, like, aside from maybe like a superhero comic like Spider-Man or something like that, where you get, or Batman, you get lots of voiceover because you're hearing inside the character's head. You don't get a lot in movies, and you're getting that less in comics these days, because I guess a lot of writers are coming at it from being inspired by cinema, and they try to keep things in the dialogue, and they also, and this is something as an artist I really appreciate, is they allow the artist to do their part of the storytelling, and they also are assuming that the reader can tell what they're looking at. And with a great artist like this, or a great artist like this, I can tell what I'm looking at in all cases. And so because of that, I don't really need the added context of some of these text boxes. I mean, they're there to kind of add more to the moment, and to fill out this moment more with the response of Tolkien, but the appearance of Tolkien here. But it is, I appreciate moments like this one before, where Conan, where the moment is just, where the artist is just telling you this is what's happening, and this is what to focus on. I like this, walking through this dark hallway, him pulling up his sword, like that last bit is just, it's kind of chill inducing. I really like it. So, but anyway, the key difference is that this just allows this allows Olivier Vatine to just draw, tell the story, and, like, we don't need, cloving his enemy's head in twain, whatever. It's like, I could see that happened. Like, I don't need anything. I don't need you to explain what I'm looking at. I just, I love, and so I think both work. This works definitely in a classic comic sense. This works in a very modern context. And like I said last time at the very end of the video, I have a feeling that you take your modern comic reader, and that's a variety of ages. I'll tell you that right now. There's modern comic readers that are older, that this may even be their generation, or younger, and then there's people who are much younger, who are just getting started, and you put both of these in front of them. I wish that there was a better, more easily accessed color version of this that was these colors, or a approximation of these colors, just because it's Barry Windsor Smith's colors, and I think that should be respected, as opposed to those horrible digital colors from the early 2000s. Anyway, if you put this in front of them, and you put this in front of them, I feel like a lot more modern readers who are used to reading modern comics are going to like this, are going to respond to this more, and may enjoy reading this more, just because this moves at the pace of a modern comic. There, and while there are caption boxes, extensive ones here, this is this is in place of dialogue. There's no dialogue here. Whereas in, other places where there's a fight, there's like a fight happening and captions happening. And also dialogue. So like it's all the things. And I would say just in, that this, especially with how quickly you can move through it, and with like these silent panels, and just how the panels are staged and how the pages are laid out, this just reads, I think, a little easier, especially to the modern eye, because as much as I love this, I feel like there is a bit of the era in some sense. There's so much of the era in this. And I won't even say that it's holding it back, because, everything's made in the era that it's in. I'm sure there's things about this that are, there obviously, as I've been talking about, there are things about this version that are of its era and potentially hold it back from being better. I'm not even saying that the era is holding this back, but just that it is a product of its time and of its creators. And it's like with Roy Thomas, you're going to have this scene where they walk through the dark and he slashes at a cool monster that you can't see. Like, that works in prose. In the original story, when you're imagining in your head, and it's like, oh my god, he's in the dark and he slashes and there's this horrible noise, and like that can creep you out, and that can work really well in a prose story. But in a visual medium, it's a little harder to get that feeling out of it. And which is why I feel like all the stuff with the crawler in this adaptation doesn't really work for me. But I feel like that's just because it's the product of being a visual medium. It's like, okay, well, I would like to have seen something, but I know that's not the case for it. But yeah, I would say that for a reader that is used to or is comfortable with reading classic comics, from this era earlier and all that, this is not, it's not going to be a problem. And I even say a modern comic reader, you'd show them this, and you're like, you can say, like, this is exemplary and the best of comics from this era. And I feel like with that, because it is, and with that era, or with that kind of advice in mind, I feel like they can read this and really get a lot out of it, because I still think this holds up. I think that it is, again, exemplary of its era, and I think that artists would get a lot out of it because it's, of course, Barry Smith, and I think that writers and especially adapters could get a lot of information out of it. But I recommend that fans of Conan, fans of Red Nails, fans of even this version of Red Nails should read this version. And you can find there's like a collected volume of a couple of Ablaze stories. It's got like Red Nails and one other one, or you can probably find these singles out there somewhere. But I think I think reading both of them, you can get a lot out of it, because I think they're both great adaptations of the same story. So will we get another Red Nails? Will we get Titan Comics version of Red Nails if they start to adapt Robert E. Howard stories themselves? I don't know. And do we need another one? Do we want another one? I'm never going to say no, because most people probably would have said that, yeah, we got the perfect one right here. One is enough. Why would we need anything else? And I'm very glad that this one exists, because I think it's gorgeous. I think they both are. And and I also think that it's great because then it's like, all right, you have fans of this, or people who will be fans of this, this is going to be their ideal version, and then there will be other people who are like, this is my ideal version, I really like this. And then there's the short story itself, so you can always go back to that. That's the one thing that when it comes to adaptation that many people seem to forget, which is, the source material's still there, and that can really never change, unless of course you're George Lucas and you just want to keep changing everything. With that said, and our epic Red Nails quest complete, all I have left to do is hawk my wares, like side questers, and Haxon my fantasy comics. These are my short stories that take place in the same universe as side questers, and it's magic users, and it's death and sorcery and all sorts of crazy things. And that stuff's in here too, as well as a lizard man with a big hammer and a lady who's really good at chopping people up. So if that's your speed, and you love fantasy comics, or you just love fantasy, check out Sidequesters Volume 1, Fetch Me a Lizard Man, or one of my Haxon anthologies. And while you're at it, if you like comics in general, check out 3-Panel Origin, my weekly webcomic series where I create a character and tell their origin in 3 panels. But it's kind of got a silly vibe to it, like Punch Clown here. It's kind of like The Tick or something like that. So if you love superheroes and you love comedy, this is kind of perfect for you. This is the remastered print version of it. It's fully colored and illustrated by me. This is the first 3 years. And then this is a book of short stories dealing with many of those characters. And it is also zany and silly. And you can buy them all on my website. So, what's your favorite version of Red Nails? Is it the short story? Is it the Barry Windsor Smith version? Is it the Ablaze, Olivier Vatine, Regis Hautier, and Didier Casagrain version? Is it the animated movie that never got made? Whatever it is, yeah, glad you love it. And thanks for being a part of this little journey.